In May of 1992, an astounding Qigong practice caused a sensation in Beijing, the capital city of China. With its profound principles and miraculous effects, it took this ancient city by storm. The news traveled fast as word spread from person to person. Very quickly, the practice found its way to over 50 countries and regions around the world, and has been warmly welcomed by those governments. In a few short years, it has attracted 100 million followers. This is Falun Dafa, introduced by Mr. Li Hongzhi. Since the beginning of civilization, mankind has always been drawn to explore the meaning of human life. Our ancestors believed that the human body is part of the integrated entity of the immense universe, and through cultivating the mind and body, harmony between human beings and the universe can be achieved. People called the methods of cultivation the Tao, the Way, or the Fa, the Law. They longed for the opportunity to listen to great enlightened beings teach the Tao and lecture on the Fa in person. Throughout history, cultivation practice has been enshrouded in a veil of religion. People kept their faith in orthodox religions, stayed away from evil, and believed in goodness, cultivated themselves, nurtured their characters, and believed that this would lead them to return to the wonderful worlds from whence they came. For this reason, they lived free, fulfilling lives and were full of hope for the future. In order to pursue cultivation, some gave up their comfortable life and went into the mountains to cultivate the Tao in solitude. The exploration into human life and the universe from the perspective of spirituality is often regarded as something beyond reach, or even something superstitious. Are there still cultivation practices that transcend the ordinary and depart from worldly mediocrity to elevate the spirit and uplift both the mind and the body? One day in 1992, Mr. Li Hongzhi and a few of his students attended the International Health Expo in Beijing and introduced the public to a cultivation practice that he established, Falun Dafa, also called Falun Gong. With his profound teachings and supernatural abilities, he won the hearts of those at the expo. At the conference, Falun Dafa was awarded the highest recognition, and Mr. Li Hongzhi was given the title of the most popular Qigong master. In the 2 years following the expo, at the invitation of local Qigong associations around China, Mr. Li Hongzhi taught Falun Dafa and visited almost all major cities in China. Close to 20,000 people attended the seminars taught personally by Mr. Li Hongzhi. The number of students reached up to 4,000 or 5,000 in each of the seminars offered by Mr. Li in the later period of his teaching. This was unprecedented. In his teachings, Mr. Li Hongzhi unveiled a secret unknown by most people, that Qigong practice is cultivation, and cultivation originated from prehistoric civilization. Prehistoric civilization is also called prehistoric culture, which is being studied nowadays to a great extent. In June 1968, American scientist William Meister found a trilobite fossil with a human footprint on it. The footprint was left by someone who wore shoes. The trilobite is a creature that existed between 600 million and 260 million years ago. Meister's discovery proves that human beings existed at that time and that, moreover, they had achieved a certain degree of civilization. In the same year, American scientist Dr. J. Mason Valentine discovered a huge underseas edifice near the islands of the Bahamas. After some tests, it was determined that this architectural structure had a history of 10,000 years. There have been many similar discoveries. Scientists publicly acknowledge that those discoveries are relics of prehistoric civilizations existing long before this present human civilization. It is known that in every civilization there were saints or enlightened beings who taught people methods of cultivation. At the beginning of this human civilization, there were Lao Tzu in China, Sakyamuni in India, and Jesus in the West. Even though they were oceans and continents apart, the teachings they imparted were very similar. Similar to any orthodox practice, Falun Gong has also been passed down from a very remote age. Mr. Li Hongzhi modified it to accommodate modern times and has made it public for the purpose of helping people elevate themselves to high levels. In his lectures, Mr. Li pointed out that there are two fundamental reasons as to why people's cultivation energy doesn't grow as they practice Qigong. One is that they don't know the principles at high levels, so they don't know how to practice cultivation. The second is that they haven't paid attention to cultivating their Jing, mind nature, or moral quality. Mr. Li said, "There exists a fundamental characteristic in this universe. It can be summarized in 3 words, and they are Zhen Shan Ren: truthfulness, compassion, tolerance." Mr. Li also expounded on the correlation between Qigong practice and sports, and Qigong and religion, and he explained the fundamental cause of illness, the relationship between Chinese and Western medical practices, and the differences between alternative Qigong healing and traditional hospital treatment. In 1995, Mr. Li compiled the contents of these lectures into a book called Zhuan Falun, to provide systematic guidelines for people to cultivate themselves in their quest to achieve higher levels of enlightenment. Those in search of a genuine cultivation system have literally climbed the highest mountains and crossed the deepest rivers to find the well-known masters. But after coming upon Falun Dafa and reading Zhuan Falun, they discovered that they had found the very thing they had been searching for all their lives. They found in this one book the answers to the questions they had about the universe, life, mankind, and cultivation. Among Falun Dafa cultivators, there are people of all different professions and all different ages. There are also many people from the scientific community who have master's and doctoral degrees, and people who are medical doctors and college professors. Even though they've mastered the most advanced technology, they can still see flaws in today's science. Upon listening to Mr. Li's flawless explanations of the human body, matter, morality, illness, time, space, and the universe, they were drawn to China's ancient cultivation culture and stepped into the practice of cultivation as well. In his book and in his lectures, Mr. Li expounds on the different meanings of Zhen Shan Ren, truth, compassion, tolerance, at different levels. He also explains how to cultivate Jing, how to be a good person, or even a better person. Contemporary science discovered that a person's mental and emotional state directly affect his physical health. Practitioners' Jing improvement has resulted in significant improvement in their physical health. In September 1998, a research team staffed by medical school faculty members and other specialists conducted a study on the mental and physical health of over 10,000 Falun Dafa practitioners in more than 10 cities in Guangdong province. According to the study, almost 10,000 practitioners had suffered from at least one ailment before they started practicing Falun Dafa. After practicing cultivation for a few months or 2 to 3 years, 70% of them either fully recovered or basically recovered. Falun Dafa is a practice that cultivates both the mind and the body. In addition to cultivating Xingjing, the 5 sets of gentle exercises are easy to learn, and anyone, the old as well as the young, can learn. Although there are only a few movements, the practice is quite thorough.
Buddha showing 1,000 hands is the first set of Falun Dafa exercises. The basis of this exercise is stretching to open up all of the energy channels. Exercise 2, Falun Standing Stance. Penetrating the 2 cosmic extremes is the third set of Falun Dafa exercises. It is the practice of penetrating the cosmic energy and mixing it with the energy inside of one's body. Falun Heavenly Circulation is the fourth set of Falun Dafa exercises. Practicing this exercise enables the energy of the human body to circulate over large areas, not in just one or several channels, but from the entire yin side to the yang side over and over again. This exercise, Strengthening Divine Power, is the fifth set of Falun Dafa exercises. It is a tranquil cultivation exercise, a multi-purpose practice to strengthen divine power, including supernatural capabilities and energy potency, by turning the Falun using Buddha's hand gestures.
As soon as one begins practicing, places where energy is congested in the body are opened up, large amounts of energy from the universe are absorbed, and the waste substances in the body are eliminated, so that the body is cleansed and purified. The energy mechanisms that Falun Dafa cultivators carry in their bodies function 24 hours a day and do not stop. Mr. Li called this phenomenon Fa cultivating people. When a cultivator practices the exercises, the Falun, which is a continually spinning law wheel, and the energy mechanisms in the body are reinforced. This has solved the problem wherein people don't have enough time to practice because of their busy schedules. The cultivation principles of Falun Dafa are based on the evolution of the universe, which is constantly rotating. That's why the practice is not concerned with time, location, and orientation. There is no mind intent, so its practitioners won't go astray. Although the benefits of Falun Dafa are quite miraculous, Mr. Li Hongzhi absolutely prohibits his students from using this practice for personal gains. He frequently points out that the imparting of Dafa is to guide people to practice cultivation toward high levels, and he requires that his students seek neither fame nor profit, conduct no worship of any individual, teach the practice on a voluntary basis, and do not get involved in politics. Falun Dafa cultivators and their free teaching banners can be seen everywhere in public parks and plazas. The beautiful music and peaceful, slow movements are noticeable contrast amid bustling crowds and noisy traffic, and seem to offer a piece of pure land in the midst of chaos. Since 1992, Falun Dafa has won over 500 awards in over 50 countries worldwide. As Mr. Li Hongzhi has said, those who hear about it look for it. Those who obtained it treasure it. The number grows day by day, and they are countless. Throughout the ages, to practice cultivation and obtain the Tao has been the dream for countless generations of people. For this dream, many left behind their wealth, possessions, and families to search for it. painfully and painstakingly. Today, Mr. Li Hongzhi has already laid this truth, this great law, this Dafa, at the feet of everyone. Please be very sure not to miss this chance of a lifetime. Falun Dafa is in this human world. Near or far, all are related through predestination.
In July 1999, China's President Jiang Zemin began a nationwide crackdown on Falun Gong, a peaceful practice guided by the universal principles of truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance. This ancient practice for mind, body, and spirit has benefited millions of people in over 50 countries around the world. Threatened by its growing popularity in China, Jiang Zemin is now leading a brutal and unrelenting campaign against Falun Gong.
The Chinese government has been systematically attempting to wipe out Falun Gong right here in America. This is no idle threat. The Chinese government has directly taken part in interfering with the proceedings of local and state governments, as well as our national government. In the United States Congress, House Concurrent Resolution 218 urges China to stop the persecution of Falun Gong in mainland China. What about the Chinese government's efforts to impose its will on Falun Gong practitioners right here in the United States? Can a foreign government, a communist regime, dictate the behavior of American politicians? The answer again is yes. We call on all people with compassion and justice in their hearts to help us stop this injustice. What follows are just a few of the alarming cases of interference by the Chinese government in United States domestic affairs. The targeting of U.S. government officials who have honored Falun Gong. American officials from all levels of government who have bestowed honors on Falun Gong have been targeted by the Chinese government. New Jersey Congressman Donald Payne was asked by Chinese embassy officials to withdraw the Falun Gong notice in the congressional record. Maryland Governor Paris N. Glendening was pressured into writing an apology letter to the Chinese government after awarding Mr. Li Hongzhi the title of honorary citizen. Mr. Li Hongzhi is the founder of Falun Gong. Mayors in Seattle, Baltimore, Saratoga, Alhambra, Santee, and St. Louis, Missouri are some of the people who have been asked to rescind proclamations given in support of Falun Gong. Fortunately, many mayors remain firm in their recognition of Falun Gong. For instance, former Mayor Stan Bogosian of Saratoga, California, who had this to say regarding his run-in with the Chinese government.
Last year in November, when I was mayor of Saratoga, I issued a proclamation in support of Falun Gong. Shortly thereafter, I had received a request in the form of two individuals from the Chinese consulate to rescind that proclamation. And since that time, I have received continuing pressure to tone down my involvement and my speaking out for people's basic human rights. And I'd like to take this opportunity to call upon my fellow elected officials in this county to come forward and speak up on this very important human rights issue, because if we don't speak, no one will. We will then, down the line, live to regret the fact that we didn't come forward when the issue affecting so many people was so crucial.
Mayor Stan Vopel of Santee, California, was also disturbed by the consul's request.
I was chilled to the bones that a communist nation would go to this extent to suppress someone's freedom of action in this country. That's what really bothered me.
Chinese consulates have also tried to direct the decisions of human rights commissions against Falun Gong. On April 17th of 2001, Consul Wang Yunqiang of San Francisco sent a letter to Larry Lee, the vice chairman of the commission, slandering both the practice and its founder. Commission member Charles Ward was outraged that a foreign government official would meddle in the affairs of the commission.
I'll say again that I'm offended by having been sent this letter by the Chinese consulate. If there's a way to enter it into this record, I'd like to enter it. What the Chinese government in San Francisco has been doing to smear Falun Gong, this is some of the evidence of it.
Obstructing Falun Gong practitioners' right to peacefully assemble. In February 2001, the Chinese Consulate General of Los Angeles asked Pasadena city officials to make the Pasadena Civic Auditorium off-limits to Falun Gong practitioners. According to General Manager Rick Barr, quote, "A day after they called the Pasadena Civic Auditorium, the consulate dropped off anti-Falun Gong pamphlets. What I told them was I was providing them. Falun Gong had contracted for the auditorium, and we did not discriminate based on beliefs." End quote. Freedom of the press has also been under attack by the Chinese government in its drive to wipe out Falun Gong. In a letter to the World Journal, the #1 circulated Chinese newspaper in the United States, the San Francisco Consul General pressured the newspaper to stop running Falun Gong ads. A Houston newspaper, the Chinese Southern Daily, also stopped running articles about Falun Gong after a consulate representative spoke to the newspaper's president and his family. Also in Houston, the Baoshanjing Library was pressured by the Houston consulate to stop carrying Falun Gong books. In the summer of 1999, Borders Books in Pasadena was pressured by its headquarters to stop carrying Falun Gong books in its store. Around the same time, the distributor of Falun Gong materials in North America, Sino United Publishing Bookstore in Monterey Park, was also pressured to stop selling Falun Gong books. This caused a great disruption to the supply of Falun Gong materials here in the United States. The Chinese government has also spread its malicious campaign against Falun Gong to college campuses. In February 2000, the Los Angeles Chinese Consulate asked Caltech to cancel an annual Falun Gong conference. Caltech not only refused to comply with the request, they instead provided 2 guards to protect both entrances to the auditorium. This, however, did not quell the consulate's efforts to stop Falun Gong activities on the Caltech campus. 2 days before the Caltech Falun Gong Club was to present a workshop to students, the consulate contacted school officials to ask that the event be canceled. These are only a few examples of the blatant attack on civil rights the Chinese government has openly carried out here in the United States. Can this disrespect for the civil and human rights of citizens and residents of this country be allowed to continue?
That I know that justice is indivisible. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.
For the spirit of freedom, which has been the very soul of this nation, We fervently hope that the answer is a resolute no.
Of course, I've read about the persecution of Falun Gong practitioners in the newspapers, but it was actually meeting some Falun Gong practitioners and hearing firsthand their experience that made me realize we needed to do more to raise the world's profile to this issue.
Falun Gong's guiding principles are truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance. The practice is peaceful, non-political, non-religious, free of charge, and of great benefit to practitioners' health and moral standards. Introduced to the general public in 1992 by Mr. Li Hongzhi, Falun Gong is practiced in over 50 countries around the world. Before the crackdown, 100 million people were practicing Falun Gong in China, more than the members in the Communist Party. Afraid that the movement was a threat to his power, Jiang Zemin initiated a ban on Falun Gong in 1999. He thought that he could eliminate Falun Gong in 3 months, but he was wrong.
To see such terrible persecution for me, it was just absurd. And I couldn't understand at first why it was happening. I felt, my duty was to talk about human rights and freedom, because it's very important. I couldn't understand why they were persecuting such good people.
The persecution is very, very severe. For example, with Falun Gong, you have thousands of people who have been detained. They have been sent to re-education camps. The leaders have got sentences from 2 to 18 years. The normal practitioners have been given re-education sentences of up to 3 years. They have been subjected to torture. There have been over 200 deaths in custody. And all this for the peaceful expression of their freedom of belief, which is guaranteed in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which China is a party to.
I am a master's degree student in university in the UK, and I went back to China in 1999 just because we are Falun Gong practitioners. We were arrested for 7 days, and they beaten us. Although I was an 8 months pregnant woman, after several days they deported us back to the UK, and just 1 month later, my daughter Minghui Yu was born in Swansea. They told me that if we carried on practicing Falun Gong, my daughter Minghui would never be registered, and she would never get her own passport. Since then, we have no choice. We had to be asylum seekers.
They did not register Minghui on the passport of Zheng Fang Mo or her partner as a Chinese citizen. So I've been trying to establish the citizen status of Minghui, and I think it's not right that any young child, obviously, is denied the right of citizenship, which is a fundamental human right that it should be open to us all.
I think the case of Zhao Ming in particular highlighted in a very specific way the problem that exists for people who practice Falun Gong, and the fact that he had been a student here, was living in Dublin, made it very real for many people, and I think as well forced the Irish government to take it up in a very specific way when the Chinese Premier was here in Ireland some time ago.
He's been in prison in a labour camp in China since May 2000. and he was just recently released on March the 12th from Tuanhe labour camp near Beijing. And we're here today to welcome back to Trinity and to his new life, Zhao Ming.
During a period of 2 weeks, I was only allowed to sleep only 1 to 2 hours each day during the 2 weeks period. And on some other occasions, we are physically punished, forced to do a kind of military squatting for a very long time, more than 10 hours a day. And it's really very bad to my legs. Now I still feel having no feelings at the bottom part of my legs. Just 2 weeks before I get out from the living camp, 5 policemen using six electric batons to shock me all over the body. And the electricity is over at least 30,000 volts.
We want the Irish government and other European governments to put real pressure on the Chinese authorities, and I think that the pressure has to be stepped up considerably. It is just not good enough that people are in large numbers, or in any numbers, being persecuted, being thrown out of their work, being imprisoned, being sent off to camps and so on for their beliefs, when they are obviously not in any way interfering with other people's rights or doing criminal or other damage.
Many Western practitioners of Falun Gong have gone to Tiananmen Square to appeal against the persecution.
We went to China, we were illegally detained, we were interrogated, we were roughly treated, we had our property stolen, and we were deported. We broke no laws. This happened for no reason at all, except for the fact that we practice Falun Gong and we believe in truthfulness, compassion and forbearance.
And I was dragged out of the hostel and dragged by my hair onto a police bus and taken to a detention centre.
At the police station, I saw a lot of Western practitioners being beaten and abused by the police. And inside another detention center, a police officer came up to me and slapped me in the face with such force that my head was smashed against the wall.
They beat me 3 times, pulling my hair, punching me, kicking me, kicked me when I'm on the ground, elbowing me in the back, punching me in the back, using the walkie-talkie to smash me in the back, twisting my fingers, kneeing me in the stomach, anything they could think of. It was really strange. You'd see their face change. They're so deceptive. They talk to you like, oh, we're friends, blah, blah, blah. And then you say, Falun Dafa, how? And they come down on you like a ton of bricks. I really fear for the Chinese practitioners, because I knew, as a Western practitioner, maybe I was getting, an easy deal.
We are not doing anything wrong, only following truthfulness, compassion, forbearance. So to arrest people for doing that, especially elderly people, like people in their 80s, and also young children and students like me, is very wrong.
Peaceful protest is an alien concept to the Chinese communist dictatorship. And in this country, we're a liberal democracy, we enjoy the right to demonstrate and express our views in a peaceful manner. Chinese government can't cope with that. It can't cope with its own citizens doing it, and it certainly can't cope with with Western Europeans doing it. So the way the 4 Britons were treated in Tiananmen Square is pretty typical, frankly, of the heavy-handed attitude which the Chinese government takes to protesters. In a way, they were lucky because they were British citizens. They were just deported. If they'd been Chinese, no doubt they'd have been carted off to a labour camp.
Since 1999, 250 adherents have been killed. According to international media reports, 50,000 Falun Gong practitioners have been arrested and detained. The whole world will be watching, and we will over and over and over again call on the government in Beijing to respect the full rights of all of the citizens. That is why we're here, and that is why I support you as a United States Senator. Falun Gong, thank you so much for inviting me.
oppression anywhere in any form is unacceptable. And we have a huge opportunity with the People's Republic at the moment, because they are trying to build their economy. They can't do that alone. They need to trade with nations like the UK, with Australia and with the United States. They can't build their economy without us, and we should be making it a condition of trade with them, of helping them build their economy, that they take a more liberal attitude to human rights, starting with Falun Gong, returning to the position that they had in respect to Falun Gong before 1999, but also improving the human rights of all minority groups and religious groups in China.
If you turn a blind eye to dictatorships, whether it was Hitler in the 1930s, whether it was Saddam Hussein in Iraq, Colonel Gaddafi in Libya or whatever, eventually these dictatorships think that the liberal democracies don't care what they do, and they can get away with literally murder. Saddam Hussein got away with gassing tens of thousands of his own citizens. In China, they're currently getting away with persecuting, thousands of Falun Gong practitioners. It mustn't be allowed to happen. The next stage on is genocide. Hitler got away in the 1930s with persecuting the Jewish community and other communities in Germany. That turned into genocide in the 1940s. The next stage is the gas chambers.
You all people gathered here, you are signs of truthfulness, of compassion, and of forbearance. You set an example for Europe and for the entire world of good values and working for the best of the human person. Do not stop with your work, because the right to meditate, the right to pray, the right to think your own thoughts in love and in peacefulness, as you are the best of the human person. You stand for the good, continue with that. Your followers in China have been and are persecuted. More than 200 people of your followers in China have been killed. They have been killed in a brutal way. They have done nothing. But the Chinese communist regime, they know that they have not been able to win the souls and the hearts of the Chinese people. You are reaching the souls and the heart of the Chinese people. Let us jointly, for a better future on this planet, on this world, work together for these just values, for the good cause of freedom, democracy, and the dignity of the human person, and for religious liberties. God bless you all. Thank you so much for letting me speak to you. Thank you.
The Falun Gong crackdown is not limited to Chinese nationals.
It seems Mayor Randy Vopel was about to issue a simple proclamation honoring the Falun Gong movement, when what should appear in his mailbox but a letter from the Consulate General of the People's Republic of China asking Vopel sort of politely not to do that.
I was chilled to the bones that a communist nation would go to this extent to suppress someone's freedom of action in this country. That's what really bothered me.
Australian citizen Jiang Sui-ying was detained for 8 months because she went to China to appeal during the annual meeting of the People's Congress. While in jail, she was forced to work more than 10 hours a day and suffered humiliation in front of male guards. On November 15, 2000, without benefit of trial, Professor Jiang Kunlun, a Canadian citizen, was sentenced to 3 years in a Chinese labor camp for peacefully practicing Falun Gong exercises in a public park. Due to international pressure, he was released after serving 2 months of his sentence.
Many organizations and governments around the world have condemned China for its persecution of Falun Gong practitioners. These same organizations persevere to reveal the truth about Falun Gong. Most recently, on March 14th, Freedom House, the world's oldest organization that monitors human rights, honored Mr. Li Hongzhi and Falun Dafa with the International Religious Freedom Award of 2001.